Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Leadership Book of the Month. I'm Kelly Byrnes, founder of Voyage Consulting Group, the creator and host of this monthly forum. We are on book number, I think, 38 now. We launched it 4 years ago, and then Bret joined shortly after the initial launch. So I'm excited to have two guests with us today. So let me introduce them or have them introduce themselves. Bret, my regular panelist, will you share your introduction and give an update?
Sure. Thanks, Kelly. And I want to thank Kelly, too, for sliding the time this month. I have an event there this afternoon that I had to slide this up. But Chris Voss has Never Split the Difference is just a great read, and it's one that I certainly didn't want to miss. So it's nice to meet you, Brandon. Look forward to your contribution to this month's conversation, as well as learning a little bit more about you. So, good afternoon, everybody. And I'm very excited to be here, as you probably can tell. So, and thank you all for joining us. I got to confess, I'm a lifelong learner. Even at my age, I'm reading all the time, and I'll share a little bit about that with you through the conversation today. It's just simply who I am. I like to tell people that I'm on the back nine of what's just been a phenomenal career and playing with house money, enjoying a tremendous tailwind. So it's the classic cliche of an overnight success, obviously, that took 34 years to get it done, but it's fantastic. I shared a table with an industry colleague, and this is kind of an interesting update this month. And while we were attending this conference, she shared a professional journey, which that's one of my opening lines, right? Tell me about yourself and your journey. And so I was going through all of this, and she was telling me the different paths and jobs she's had, and some were pretty direct, and some, not so much to the individual stories, but each job she'd had kind of prepared her for the next, and then finally to the job that she had today. She was about my age. And what's the point? So every job that we have is a training ground for the next opportunity, and it's only if we view it that way. And in my case, the network of buyers and sellers, which enable me to do what I do today, it took 34 years to accumulate that network and build those relationships. So, however, and this is kind of my point here, early on, I certainly didn't view it that way, right? It was just another job, and I had to go in, the days were long, and I never really took the time to reflect or appreciate all of the learning I was getting from just simply doing my job. And it's a mindset thing, is kind of my call out. As you're going through what you do each and every day, don't look at your job as a job. Look at it as an opportunity that's preparing you for what lies ahead, the next job and the job after that and the job after that. And it will reinvigorate and re-energize how you approach your day to day. So I'm going to segue on one last story. I'll turn it back over to Kelly. So as I said, I'm a lifelong reader. Kelly and we covered The Man's Meaning of Life, which was Viktor Markl's book. And there's just a couple books that everybody references, everybody quotes. The 7 Habits is one. And then the Dale Carnegie book. I thought, I've read Dale Carnegie multiple times, or not Dale Carnegie, The 7 Habits, and Kelly and I did Viktor Markl, but I'd never read Dale Carnegie. So I said, you know what? I'm doing it. So I literally bought it. Would you believe that the original print of the Dale Carnegie book, How to Make Friends and Influence People, was printed in 1931 of all things? It's almost 100 years old. Now, it's been reprinted a couple of times, but be that it may, the original was 100 years old. So what's the point? There's a chapter in the book, and the book is a person's name to that person is the sweetest sound, I believe, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit. So I'm reading the book. I've got this new skill, right? I'm going to practice. So the next day I'm sitting having breakfast, and the server, the wait staff comes up, and the gentleman's filling the water glass. And I looked at his name tag, and his name was Aaron. And I said, "Good morning, Aaron." And Aaron looks back at me in the eye, and he said, "That's not my name." He said, "I forgot my name badge." And that's just one that we had in the back of the kitchen. And I laughed so hard. And I'm sure he had no appreciation for why I was laughing as hard as I would. And so I ate my breakfast and all of that. And then as I was leaving the restaurant, I pulled him aside and I explained the story. But the long and the short of it is I learned a new skill, and I said, I'm going to apply this. And for those of you listening, right, the general rule of thumb, and I think this is pretty accurate, is that if we have a new skill and we repeat it at least 3 times within the first 72 hours of acquiring a skill, it will eventually form a positive habit. So that's one that I obviously practiced as much as I could. And every time I saw somebody with a name badge, I called them by their first name. So I was applying the skills from the Dale Carnegie book. So what a wonderful, wonderful story.
I love it.
That's awesome.
In the book we'll talk about in a few minutes, he gives practice. Isn't that the one? He gives practice points in there. Practice this or try this out. He gives a lot of different ways to go about the different things. So,
well, and that's one of my favorite aspects of the book. It's not really a book like you sit down and read end to end or cover to cover. It's a manual. It's a how-to.
yeah,
And if you approach it that way, it's a very different mindset. It's not fiction where you just sit down and read it. It's literally a how-to manual in negotiating.
All right, before we go into it further, let's meet Brandon. So Brandon Calloway, welcome. And Brandon and I also know each other from Rockhurst University, as he is a co-founder of a really important nonprofit in Kansas City called GIFT. And you do a lot of things, Brandon. So beyond the nonprofit, does a lot of different things in the community. And we also know each other through the Executive MBA program at Rockhurst, which Brandon is pursuing right now, graduating in a year. So Brandon, what else would you like to share as far as your introduction?
Oh, I mean, that's all the important stuff, right? But no, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say what prompted the invitation today for you to join was we had class just a few weeks ago, and organization behavior and leadership. And Brandon shared some negotiation tips during the class. And I'm not sure, but a couple of different times your classmates asked you questions. I don't remember if that was one of the ones, but it might have been that they were asking for your view on a couple of things. But Brandon shared on negotiation. And so I asked him, hey, do you want to come and join our conversation later this month? And he said, sure. What's it about? So very excited to get to share you with even more people.
Yeah. Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate you for inviting me. And Brett, is great to meet you. I'm excited about the conversation. But yeah, about me, obviously, CEO, co-founder of GIFT, like you said. So nonprofit really focused on helping to decrease the racial wealth gap here in Kansas City, grow Black-owned businesses. And we know all of that goes into a reduction in poverty-related crime. So just trying to create a more equitable and a better Kansas City for everybody through giving, and we do that by giving grants to Black-owned businesses, help them grow and expand and create jobs in predominantly Black communities to create an economic engine that helps to do those two things, right? Reduce poverty-related crime and close the racial wealth gap. And like Brett said earlier, I'm also a lifelong learner. I am always looking for things that I don't know and trying to, absorb that knowledge. Funny, Brett, that you talked about learning, having a job and that job being a source of learning. And that, while you're in the job, you don't often see it that way. And I think most people don't see it that way. And so I am 34 years old and I have had, I think 42 jobs in my lifetime. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but many are at the same time.
Many at the same time. Yeah, 2 and 3 all at the same time. And I look at what I'm doing now and look at, lessons that I've learned. And I mean, my first job was, I was a part-time clerk at Quick Trip, right? And so cleaning up, bathrooms and stocking shelves and all of that. But I learned a lot of customer service from Quick Trip. I learned a really high level of customer service from Quick Trip that permeates into how I lead people, how I treat my staff, how we look at the customer experience of people actually coming into our business center and getting services from us. And it's just even my previous career in fitness and looking at how we evaluate the of a training program, the same principles in how we evaluate the effectiveness of anything that we do. If we're looking at our marketing efforts, how we can't just do marketing and say, okay, hopefully that has a return. We actually have to have a process, have to evaluate the effectiveness, the return, the benefit, and then tweak it. So it's 40 jobs. I've learned a lot, right? Because I've had a lot of different experiences, and I love to put myself in challenging situations and challenge myself with new experiences. And that's actually, how I got to talking about the negotiation stuff in class, was because I read the other negotiating book of Getting to Yes, and I did that 75 hard fitness challenge. So 75 days of 2 workouts a day, but one of the things in that was that you have to read 10 pages a day. And so I think I went through 9 books in those 75 days, and it was probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite thing about going through that challenge, was all the books that I was reading, all the stuff that I was learning. And I'm excited to be here with both of y'all today and talk about what I learned about negotiation.
Yeah, awesome. Before we go into the book, or the book specifically, I just want to share a little bit about how the conversation will work. So when we created this forum, we created it for, our intention is for leaders of tomorrow who invest in themselves today. So they might not read 9 books in 75 days, or Brett and I always have 2 or 3 going at the same time. So it might not be quite that same, but if you're a leader, a newer leader or a highly experienced leader that doesn't want to become a dinosaur, then this conversation will be for you. So we don't do a book review. We tend to focus informally on things that we liked or learned, or even in the past we shared things we didn't like to about the book. So we'll take turns. Brett and I both read Never Split the Difference. As Brandon mentioned, he read Getting to Yes, which is another foundational book on negotiation. It was released about 5 years before this one. But this author, Chris, refers to Getting to Yes in the beginning as a good foundational book about the process of negotiation. So this adds a little bit more, I would say, to the emotional aspect of it and some of the nuances of the actual conversation. But even though I knew that Brandon hadn't read this exact book, his expertise in negotiation in a variety of different scenarios and settings is what really compelled my interest in hearing what Brandon had to say today. So, and the book is Never Split the Difference. Negotiating as if your life depended on it. So it's not so much only about the process, it's about how you use this in your everyday life. And so, Brandon, I look forward to you chiming in and sharing your thoughts as we dig in. So a little bit about the book. So it's pretty famous. More than 3 million have been sold since 2016. Yeah, and it's a success. A book is considered a success if it sells like 10,000. So 3 million is pretty good. Let's see. As usual, some of our other books were referred to. Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow was referred to a few times. The main author of this, Chris Voss, he is the founder of the Black Swan Group. He's an instructor on negotiation, keynote speaker, a former Kansas City beat cop. That was fun to hear some stories about that. He's also, the main thing he talks about in here is his experience as the lead negotiator, hostage negotiator for the FBI. So he shares about a lot of those examples, along with how applicable what he talks about is in everyday leadership moments. He has a co-author, 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃, who also co-authored Never Eat Alone, and he's a consultant and coach, researcher, and writer. Okay, so that's the background on the book. And so, Brett, you want to just dive in and share some key takeaways or favorite aspects of the book?
Sure.
Okay.
This is my 3rd time through the book, actually, so I'm pretty well versed in the book. And as I said, it's a manual. It's not something that I recommend that you read and put on the shelf and never reference again, right? It's one of those, it's something that you can dust off and sharpen your skills, and, iron sharpens iron kind of thing. But it's a great book. So we always talk about, who would this book actually be applicable for? And naturally, because it's a negotiation book, we think of buyers and sellers. But what I would challenge the status quo on that is to say that we're all buyers and sellers, and we're all negotiating probably more than we ever realize. We buy a car, we buy groceries, we're negotiating our phone bill. Everything's negotiable, right? And all of these techniques and tactics are applicable in our everyday life. We don't have to be a professional buyer, professional seller to realize and recognize that we are all negotiators. So the book, like I said, is it has applications, I think, for literally everybody. So I want to make that statement. I facilitated a workshop on it, and I always get a kick out of learning and then being an observer following the event, because I'll sit and listen to how people's behaviors have changed, or whether they're applying a technique or, something that tells me that it resonated. I did a bunch of research on learning and development, and the data would say that you can do a hard test. That's for hard skills like accounting and science. You can do observed behavior, which is what I just referenced. You can do a survey, and then obviously you can see the impact in financials. But just simply applying that technique of observed behavior, I get a kick out of seeing people utilize the techniques from Never Split the Difference. So the one that I get the biggest kick out of that I'll open with is using the late night FM DJ voice. That is so much fun, right? And if you've ever watched any of the police shows where they get into a hostage situation or negotiation, who's ever on the good guys, right? The cop side, they're using this low, calm, cool voice. And when I read that the very first time when I was a young guy, there used to be a late night FM DJ called Wolfman.
I remember that.
You do?
I do.
And I don't know, you always have the imagery thing that they talk about when you read something, and then you form the mental image, and that was the image that I got. But the point I'm making is that in negotiation, right, an elevated pitch, an elevated tone has a tendency to get an elevated pitch and an elevated tone in response. Mm-hmm. And that elevated pitch and tone, again, leads to a heightened sense of anxiety. So if you want to calm things down, if you want to get to a sense of reason, if you want to negotiate from the basis of logic, the first thing that I would suggest right out of the book is utilizing your late night FM DJ voice.
And I think not just getting to logic, but just getting on the same page with the other person.
Mm-hmm, so, absolutely.
Like you said, setting the tone or calming any of the emotions, and that when you enter, your voice, whether it's a greeting or it's in person, it could be on Zoom, but your voice helps set the tone for that conversation.
No question.
That ties in with him, or what you said prior to that was one of his main points in here is about your mindset, and not to be afraid to negotiate, and not to make it so scary. And so he talked a lot about mindset. Brandon, that's what makes me think of you too with mindset, because I know you're a big mindset guy.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the reasons I read I wanted to read a negotiation book in the first place is that I've been going back and forth between reading leadership books and then marketing books, right? Mm-hmm. And my thought was that negotiating, the skills that go into negotiating will permeate into both of those, and even in the book, they point out that you're always negotiating. Like we're trying to figure out where we're going to go for dinner tonight, right? That's a negotiation. I have a team member that might be underperforming, or might not be underperforming, but they might be doing something that is different than the organization needs or is asking for. And so how are we addressing that? How are we correcting that behavior? That is also a negotiation, because the way that we initiate that conversation and handle that conversation, outside of the content of the conversation, but just like you said, the tone of voice, the body language, all of that impacts the outcome of that negotiation. I start a business. I am, whether I'm at a booth and I'm selling a product and somebody walks by, or I have a service-based thing and I'm sitting down at an actual client consultation. This is a negotiation, right? And so was one of the reasons that I really I loved the book, because it helped it helped to grow skills, and it actually just helped to see how something like negotiation that we can think of as manipulation or persuasion, or it has a scary feeling to the word, and shows how no matter what you're negotiating every day.
Mhm.
In these various different high stakes things you're already negotiating in, and low stakes things you're already negotiating in. And so I think even that, and the understanding of that, makes business negotiations the typical, thought of common practice of the commonly thought of practice of negotiation, that now seems even less scary,
Yeah.
because it's understood that this is a normal, natural thing that we are always doing on a regular basis.
Right. Oh, so much goodness in there, with the mindset and accepting that it's a normal thing and not being afraid of it. He talks in here, and I think they do, if memory serves, in Getting to Yes as well, about the assumptions going in, and how we can assume such negative, and then there's low trust. And he's doing hostage negotiation, so that's negative.
Yeah.
But so a lot of what we're negotiating, both sides are good, reasonable, and fine, but we end up being too afraid to ask for what we want, or we haven't thought of it ahead of time, or we don't think we'll get it. So this is never split the difference, because he says don't compromise, because when you just split the difference, then neither side's really that happy. And so don't be afraid to dig a little bit deeper and go into the negotiation aspect of it.
Yeah.
Brett, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I applaud everything that you're saying. I think about the training aspect of it, and two things kind of jump out. If you've ever called a customer service center, I guess is the best way to think of it, the person that you're talking to will always open with, well, I'm sorry about that, or how can I help you? And the book obviously talks about that. The other thing I thought of too, I travel a lot. I'm on airplanes, more often than I probably would like. And over the years, I've done a lot of that. And peak travel season is always the middle of the summer. It's hot. And the places that I go often involve, these small regional jets. And you can imagine walking out of an airplane or an airport in Dallas, Texas, or someplace in Texas, and you're outside, you're hot, and you get up one of these small airplanes, and the airplane's smaller, so limited overhead space, and maybe one or two seats on each side, and somebody's late for a connection, and they get on the plane. So I deliberately was trying to paint a picture there. Hopefully I got to the point. So as I traveled, I would observe these flight attendants. I'm always studying people, and in this one particular instance, this lady was late for the flight. It's hot. She got this bag that doesn't fit in the overhead bin, and everything is just going wrong. It just kind of elevated. And the flight attendant approached this lady, and I watched, and first thing she asked, what's your name? And I don't remember what the lady's name was, doesn't matter, but what's your name? And where did you start from today? And she gave her the name of the city that she started, and where are you going? And then the follow-up question was, how can I help you? And so there was 4 open-ended questions, followed by, with what Voss talks about, a mirror, where we actually we repeat the last 3 words of somebody's sentence, and then addressed her by her first name. So open-ended questions, used a mirror, and then what they call a label. And so I observed this one time on an airplane, and I thought, that was pretty good. It was pretty interesting how the tension and in this passenger was de-escalated very, very quickly. You didn't think much of it. Well, I was on a plane 3 weeks later. The same exact thing happened, word for word. And I thought, what is the likelihood that there are 2 flight attendants? I think one was a gentleman, one was a lady, that they both used the same technique to de-escalate what was a pretty heightened, intense situation. And the light bulb went off for me. You can train this, right? And the point I'm making is the same thing with negotiation. I'm sure we've all observed people. We say, man, they're a pretty good negotiator. And there are people that come by it naturally, but the book, and studying the techniques, studying the practices, you can learn this stuff. No different than how a flight attendant is taught to de-escalate the tension with an angry passenger.
And I think then that goes to our core values of I forgot which one of you said about making sure it's not manipulation. So we can use these techniques and tools and but use them for good. So the whole point of any negotiation, I've studied it a lot, and it's one of the classes I teach in the MBA program, but it's understanding the other side so that they leave happy too, because then they'll execute. They'll deliver on what you come up with. If you're only in it to win, no matter what, like I'll get that customer to sit down and be quiet. That's what some flight attendants might have, that attitude. That's not going to help the flight go well. So coming back to your core values of being in it for the bigger picture and helping it get implemented is key. Yeah. What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me of the portion of the Getting the Yes book that I read about like we want to try to be collaborative rather than being compromising, right? And so like you're saying, we're not trying to give each party half of what we want, right? We're trying to like really figure out, okay, how can I win? How can they win? Right. Which means that we got to go deeper and see what is it that this person actually wants. Now, in a hostage negotiation situation, that there's probably not it's probably not win-win. We probably don't want to. We probably don't. I mean, but maybe I don't know. I'm not a hostage negotiator. Maybe there are times where win-win is completely acceptable. We give them a bunch of money, everybody stays alive,
or just staying alive. Yeah, that might be the way.
But it just goes back to the attack the problem, not the person. And so when we take all of the people, I take myself out of it, I take the other person out of it and say, okay, what is really the underlining goal? What are we trying to get to? What is it that they actually want? And what are the possibilities that we can get to what we want, right? Which is what like Brett, that's kind of what I heard in your story of the flight attendants. We've all been on planes where there have been an irritable passenger, and we've been in stores or in at the stoplight, right? We're irritable people, and there is a really easy response to do to say, oh, this person is they're annoying, they're mean, they're rude, but being able to separate the behavior from the person and say, okay, what is actually wrong here, which is what it sounds like those flight attendants were doing when they were asking those questions and trying to figure out how they can help de-escalating, focusing on this person may not be pleasant right now, but there's an underlining problem that we can both work together to figure out, to get everybody back on the same page. And so that was probably one of my favorite parts of the Getting the Yes book.
Yeah, they go into that as well about not assuming and just digging deeper. And he talks a lot in the beginning about listening. And the very first job of a negotiator is to listen. Yeah. And so often we go in just trying to bulldoze our way to get a victory and whatever it is that I want, but he says to not do that, just listen and ask the open-ended questions and get them to talk and share. So then you understand even better. And then you come up with better solutions probably, or ideas or ways to move forward in that. One of my other main takeaways, which summarizes a lot of this, was the importance of emotional intelligence. And that's what he tied in with. He talked a lot about this book, The Thinking Fast and Slow, about the emotions that people bring into that people use to make decisions. And so, and then we make decisions based on emotion and then justify with logic. And so understanding that emotional intelligence during the conversation being aware of their emotions, not denying them or minimizing them, not turning it around to be about yourself. All of those things can help you influence the conversation to take it forward. So, Brett, thoughts from you? Or what's your next one if you want to go into another takeaway?
I've got two things left that I think are worthwhile. And one of them focuses on preparation. And the way I illustrated this, think of the last time that you went to buy a car and all of the research that you did into the price or the value or what you wanted to pay. But did you spend any time preparing the questions that you wanted to ask? You had an idea of what you wanted to pay, but could you simply sit down in front of the salesperson and say, this is my offer, take it or leave it? Or did you actually script the questions? I'm in sales, I do a lot of selling. And so the preparation is definitely an important part of that. And Voss does quite a bit about that preparation in the book as well. The other thing, and there's quite a bit of debate about this one. I've had some professional negotiating classes that employers have paid for in the past about who goes first in a negotiation. They call that anchoring. And there's two schools of thought, right? The seller anchors first, the buyer anchors first. I'm of the opinion that as the buyer or the seller, I want to go first. So it doesn't matter which hat I'm wearing, buyer or seller, I want to go first. And again, like I said, depending on what consultant or what educator, what author you're reading, you can get differing schools of thought. Now, he goes into detail about something that he calls the Ackerman principle, which I've heard it phrased just simply as dropping an extreme anchor. That's typically how you'll hear it phrased. So you have a target price of what you want to pay, and let's call that X. The Ackerman principle would say your first anchor, which you're going to drop, is 65% of X. So let's just say you want to pay $10,000 for a car. Your opening offer is $6,500. So you can imagine the seller with a price tag on a vehicle of $10,000 and you offer $6,500. They can react a lot of different ways. So you have to be careful with this one, right? You can drop an anchor that's so extreme in the case of the Ackerman principle at 65% that they just simply say, hey, here's an uninterested party or somebody really isn't interested in closing the deal. So you have to be careful about that. 65 goes to 85, 85 goes to 95, and a 95 goes to 100, which was your initial target price. What's the point? Look at the differences in the numbers. 65 to 85 is 20%, right? So what's the title of the book? Never Split the Difference. So if the difference is 65 and 10,000, that's a $3,500 difference. You would say you would move from 6,500 up 1,750, right? But that's not what they do. It moves up 20%. Then he moves up 10%, and then he moves up 100%. The other part that I find, and it's very effective too, this last point, is using odd numbers. So if you use odd numbers with decimals, things that end in say a 7 or a 9, the counterparty naturally has to ask themselves, how did you arrive at that number? And you can even ask your counterparty that. Well, if they give you that in response, have them justify the number. And it will be interesting to hear the responses that you get from people and how they justify their number. And I've gotten a whole myriad. I won't go into them all here, but the one that's probably most, I don't know. Well, I like that number. Well, really? Well, I mean, if you can't back your number up with any science or any justification, obviously you're leaving yourself at risk to being out negotiated by somebody who's probably a little bit better prepared or might know the market a little better than you do. So again, what's the point? The book is just rich with examples like this of things that you can literally apply almost immediately in your day-to-day life, either in your work or your personal life, because really life's about negotiating.
Yeah. Brandon, what were you thinking?
I can see the danger in extreme anchoring. If I'm trying to sell you a car and you offer me 50% of what I want for it, I might just walk away and say, okay, I'm not about to waste my time in this conversation. But it is a really interesting tactic that I have not. I hadn't read about that in a negotiation, and so Brett, I appreciate that because that's so a cool tactic, and it also it got me thinking of the one of the core principles of getting to yes was just understanding that your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Yep.
So understanding your BATNA, understanding your the opposition's BATNA as well, and when I when I read that, it actually, I didn't see it necessarily as a negotiating tactic, even though I know it is. To me, it like a light bulb went off. I was like, oh, that's just good practice, right?
Mhm.
Might not get an agreement done, right? And understanding what is my best option, and you know, after I read the book, coincidentally, I did have a negotiation with, there was a program that we were looking at doing, and we were talking with a potential funder about it, and there's a specific price tag on it, and I thought, okay, well what's my best alternative and what's their best alternative, and what's our lowest number, and I actually went in feeling really good, because the best alternative I had was, well, we just won't do it, and if we don't do it, I can live with that. We can like, there's a whole bunch of reasons that can be fine and okay. So it like, just understanding and having that, and then even laying it out of like,
Mhm.
here's if we can't make a deal, then this is what we'll do, and if we can't, like, this is our lowest threshold for a deal that we can make, so if we can't do that, then we'll do this, which is nothing. And it ultimately we ended up using the bet. Like, we didn't make the deal, and I was completely okay with it. But it helped me be more at ease in going in to a negotiation. I think that it's also just really developing and understanding your BATNA, and then using it when identifying when it can be strong to actually lay it out, was a tactic and lesson that I think I'll use probably forever. And again, when we trying to figure out where we go for dinner, like, when we, everything is negotiating.
Yeah.
And now I'm not gonna use, when me and my girlfriend are trying to go out somewhere, I'm not gonna drop an extreme anchor on that's dangerous negotiating, right? But just understanding these tactics and applying them to various different situations.
Yeah. So like with going out for dinner with your girlfriend, if you don't feel like having tacos, then, and you say, oh, I'm open to anything.
Yeah.
Then now you might be having tacos. So if you know you don't want tacos that day, then you say, I really want a burger, but I don't feel like tacos. Where could we go? So then you can start talking about a burger. That's what the technique would be. But so many times we just think, oh, I'll be the nicer one and just be open. But then I'm not really happy because I don't feel like tacos that day.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So knowing yourself is key. And then I also think that it's helpful to think through what their BATNA would be too.
Right.
And so the more you think about them and really seek to understand the other side is one of my key takeaways in this whole topic of negotiation.
Well, he uses the term tactical empathy extensively throughout the book. I think that's really what you're referring to.
Yeah. Yeah. And having respect for that, thinking it through first if you can, but having respect for it and not minimizing it or just trying to win for the sake of winning. He does give a lot of different techniques. So we need to start wrapping up. We could talk forever, but he does give a variety of specific techniques, from the questions to not being afraid to hear no, to getting them to say yes 3 times. There's a lot of specific techniques with stories and examples throughout. So when we get to the end, we usually ask, Brett, my last question for you. What do we usually ask? Would you recommend this book?
Absolutely. This one's got broad appeal, broad application for so many different situations, so many different people. If you're in sales, obviously it's table stakes, and there's generally 4 or 5 books. and social media has gotten this common thing. What are 5 books for leaders? What are five books for salespeople? It's a group of 5. But yeah, this one for really for salespeople and leaders. I think this is table stakes. And it's as much as it's about selling and about negotiations, it's about understanding the human dynamic, the human element, and you can also recognize when, I don't want to say, to Brandon's point, you're not being manipulated, but you can recognize the skill, I guess is the best way to frame it, when you're on the receiving end, and then it's kind of like point counterpoint type of thing.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing too, I would say, is that when you recognize somebody that's demonstrating an elevated sense of negotiation and an elevated sense of ability, you have a greater appreciation for who you're negotiating with.
Good point. I also would encourage people to read this. I recommend it. And this was my second time through it. So I bought it when it first came out and had fun going through it again for our conversation. And this time I saw it as broader than I remember thinking about it the first time, because I really did see these, some were strategies and others were tactics, but these ideas used in such a variety of different situations. So I even thought of my niece that's 12. I like to go to bed early. And when she spends the night on a Friday or Saturday, she does not want to go to bed early. So, and then what is that really about? And, just getting in the practice of leadership is all about the other people. And so negotiation can be as well. And he reinforces that. So I would recommend it for everybody. And Brandon, what are your thoughts on this book, the other book, Getting to Yes?
Oh yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend getting the yes, and kind of going back to what we're both saying, because even in that book, they mentioned you're able, when you understand the tactics and strategies, you're able to recognize when they're being used on you, right? When you get invited to a negotiation and they want to do it at their office, and they say, you sit here, and now the sun is shining in your eyes and it's cold, and
the hair's been spun down.
Yeah, and and so now you really want to get this meeting over because you're uncomfortable and you want to get up. And so being able to recognize it and say, hey, that light's that light's bright. It's really cold in here. Is this how you guys normally operate? Like being able to again, not like you're being manipulated, but being able to recognize when things are being used against you. And so yes, I definitely recommend Getting to Yes, and Never Split the Difference is already one of the next books, high on my list. I'm about to hop back into to 75 hard, and so I'm about to do it again, another 75 days.
All right.
And so I'm already racking up a list of books to just keep up.
Awesome. This will be a good one to add to that list.
Yeah.
And I forgot to go check over to the comments during our conversation, but Diane, I see that you posted that you earned your MBA at Rockhurst, so we appreciate you and the Rockhurst family.
Yeah.
And another person said about my taco example that I never didn't want tacos though. So, I know, I thought at least it's not Taco Tuesday today as we're filming this. Yeah, but thank you for chiming in, and if you are watching and you have questions, feel free to post them in the LinkedIn comment area or in the YouTube area, and we'll check that once in a while. Of course, if you tag us on LinkedIn, we'll for sure see that at some point. So feel free to share your stories or ask us questions, and we will be glad to chime in on that. Thank you for this robust conversation, Brett and Brandon. Brett and I will be back May 22nd to dive into The Power of Clarity by Ann Latham, who joined us in December with her disconnect principle. So we'll be back next month with the author of The Power of Clarity, and that will be on May 22nd at our usual time at 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern. And let me put the banner where you can go for If you would like to learn more about the Leadership Book of the Month, voyagecg.com/leadership books. And Brett and I have our list of our favorite leadership books there. And maybe we'll need to update those. I don't know if I have this one on there, but I'm going to double check it and see where that goes.
You mentioned tagging and emailing and all of that. I had a thought as I was preparing. As you read the book and you apply any of the techniques, I'd love to hear your success stories. Hey,
Yeah.
This is the technique I applied, and this was the outcome. It was successful. It wasn't successful, et cetera, et cetera. But I would love to hear from our listeners as they read the book, if they haven't already, and then as they apply the techniques in their day-to-day life.
Yeah, awesome. That would be fun. And we might, it might take a couple tries to get it down. So even how you try it a little bit and what works or doesn't, and then how you improve. Because I know I've had that as well with some of these techniques. So,
well, there was a use case in the book of a colleague of Voss's who had missed a flight and he needed to catch a flight for a business engagement. And he was in line at the customer service counter at the airport, and the couple in front of them kind of lost their shit, so to speak, and they didn't get another flight, right? They were rejected and turned away. And this gentleman went up there, late night FM DJ voice, labels, mirrors, tactical empathy. I can't remember exactly, but I think it was 4 or 5 of the techniques. And you know what? He got on a flight. So it's amazing how these things work, and they really, really do work.
I literally have done that many, many times, probably dozens of times, where I used to have a job 5 cities a week. And so things would happen all the time. And I would intentionally wait to go behind the person that was being the rudest, that was the maddest in the gate area. And I'd go in line behind them so that I could be the nice one. And I'd get upgraded to first class every single time without even asking, but just for being empathetic.
Yep.
And that was a positive use of these kind of skills. Thank you both for this conversation. Thank you to Diane and everybody for watching. Thank you, Diane. I saw your note there. And we look forward to seeing you again as you continue your leadership development and lifelong learning. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Brett and Brandon.
Thanks for having me.